Welcome to AskFOI, where we answer the most common questions we receive about prophecy, Israel, and the Bible. With me to answer today's question is Ty Perry. Good to see you, Ty.
Good to see you, Steve. Thanks for having me on.
You know, there are some Hebrew words, maybe not many, that Christians know. One, what I think would be shalom, which is peace. Maybe others know todah, which is thank you, or ken, which is yes, lo, which is no. But there's a Hebrew phrase that I'm guessing most Christians have never heard. And that phrase is Tikkun Olam. And it's deeply connected to the Jewish culture. Can you talk about what Tikkun Olam is, that Jewish concept?
Sure. Well, Tikkun Olam basically means world repair or repairing the world. And the concept behind it is that the world is broken. Now, we would agree with that as Bible believing Christians. The view of the broken world within Judaism is a little bit different because they wouldn't see it as innately an innately evil or fallen place, to use biblical or theological language. Rather, they would typically see the world as basically a good place or innately a good place that still has some room for improvement, and that it is the job of the Jewish people, and in some cases even of humanity, to cooperate with God in fixing those areas where it's not perfect yet. And so that's the concept of Tikkun Olam, is that you're seeking to repair what is broken in the world. Um, and typically looks like, today, at least in 21st century Judaism or in the Jewish community, social action. So this is something that would have been probably pretty foreign to the Jewish community prior to, say, the Holocaust, to Orthodox Judaism, which was the predominant view before the Holocaust. Um, they would not have viewed it quite that way. They would have understood it as, you know, different policy, rabbinic policy towards the poor and things like that. Whereas today, world repair typically takes on a liberal bent politically. So you'll see a lot on, you may see some who are supporting of different liberal causes as a means of bringing societal change under the banner of Tikkun Olam.
What are some of the ways that this is lived out? What are some of the areas that the Jewish people, specifically Israelis, go and repair the world? I think it's interesting that we often see when there's a tragedy in the world, a storm or an earthquake, that you'll see Israelis from this very tiny country in their most remote places doing some amazing things. And I think it's part of this concept. So, what are some of the things that they do?
Yeah, I think with Tikkun Olam, there's also on the part of the Jewish community this sense of responsibility to the rest of the world, as you're kind of alluding to with Israel, that where there's disaster of any kind. So we've seen this with hurricanes, with earthquakes, any kind of disaster. Israel is typically first, or one of the first nations on the scene with humanitarian aid, with medical teams that are volunteering their time to come in and to help people. So I think it plays a big role, not only in the grassroots level, as I mentioned, in Jewish communities worldwide, but especially with Israel, you see it where they come in to be a blessing, if you will, in really dark circumstances.
There's really a sharp contrast, isn't there, between the way the Jewish people would see the world and their responsibility to Israel's enemies, and the way they would look at land before really people. I think of what happened in Gaza, where the Jewish people were, I think, 10,000 were taken out of Gaza when there was that agreement. And right away, those areas that were flourishing, those farms and different things, those different businesses, they all just went by the wayside. So, how do you see that contrast between those two worldviews?
Well, and we're speaking in broad terms here, but you do see a selflessness on the part of a lot of the Jewish community and on the part of Israel, when it comes to, as we just said, helping others, or even their neighbors. So we see this quite often when there are conflicts, and certainly in this war as well, that's currently happening, where Israelis and Israeli hospitals and medics are routinely take care medically of the people that have just tried to bomb their people or committed terrorist attacks. And you don't see that the other way. And the other way, that humans are targets for Israel. Human beings are human beings made in the image of God, no matter whether they're Arab or Jewish, if they're Muslim, Christian, or Jewish. And so it's a stark difference between the worldviews behind the actions that each side may take at times.
What can we as Christians learn from the concept of Tikkun Olam?
Well, I love the concept of Tikkun Olam. I'm glad you asked that, because we would come from a biblical worldview, understanding the world is a broken place, and it's not basically a good place. It's a totally broken place, um, and we would understand it's not our job to make the world a kingdom, the messianic kingdom. That is what Jesus is going to do when he returns. And yet, that doesn't mean, or shouldn't mean, that we don't try to alleviate suffering, physical suffering, when we can, to help those who are poor. Jesus himself said that the poor you will have with you always. The implication is there that we should be helping those people. So repairing the world that way, that's good. But keeping an eye on the fact that the world will not be repaired until the Messiah returns. But I think also, to tie this back to the gospel of the Messiah is that broken people who make up that broken world can be restored, restored in their relationship to God fundamentally, and then everything else kind of falls into place. I think of one of my personal heroes. His name was William Wilberforce. He was a Bible believing Christian back in the 19th century, and he took this idea of being a Christian who is on, this side of Eden, if you will, and said, "I know the kingdom is not here, but I need to use my gifts and my talents as a believer to alleviate suffering." And he did that most notably by leading the effort to end the slave trade and slavery in the United Kingdom. And he did that. And so I think that's an example. That's a very famous example of how we should, as believers, be seeking not to bring in the kingdom, but to repair parts of the world where we can, fundamentally through the gospel.
That's so well said, Ty, and very encouraging. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Steve. It's been a pleasure.